So we'll be starting the cataracts update session, phacoemulsification in difficult situations. Uh, just sharing my screen. For the lack of time is, I think we will start. So we have 7 speaker in this session. Dr. Shayan Das, who is very senior consultant in Shushruth Eye Hospital, will be speaking first on the corneal comorbidities, phacoemulsification for corneal comorbidities. So I'll request Dr. Shayan to start without much delay. Actually, my screen sharing is not opening at the moment. So let us start with the session and later on we'll introduce Sajjan wise. So Dr. Shayan, if you are ready to share your screen.
Yes, I am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, sir, please switch on your video, sir.
Yeah. It's visible now?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shugata, for having me in this session. Proud privilege to present in AIOC. So my topic for today will be phacoemulsification in corneal comorbidity. So pre-existing corneal pathology may compromise surgical technique, may lead to suboptimal or undesirable results post-operatively, or even after cataract surgery over a period of time, the corneal pathology may progress. So for best possible outcome, we should be able to detect and correctly identify the corneal pathology and initiate appropriate perioperative management. So beginning with Fuchs endothelial dystrophy, it's very important to identify this pathology on slit lamp before surgery. So we get this endothelial dusting kind of an appearance along with these gray areas well delineated. And if we have Fuchs endothelial dystrophy, as a cataract surgeon, our primary decision will be whether we should go along with the cataract surgery only, or we should ideally do a procedure called endothelial keratoplasty triple, that is combining a phacoemulsification with an EK procedure. So when should we think about an EK triple procedure? If the patient complains of symptoms of early morning blurring of vision for around 2 to 3 hours after getting up in the morning, if the central corneal pachymetry is more than 640 microns, or if the specular parameters are of poor quality. However, we must remember that these low specular parameters is the least important among the 3 of the criteria. And intraoperatively, we should use good quality viscoelastic, particularly dispersive ones, and a soft shell technique would be preferable. We should use a BSS as the irrigating fluid, and we should modulate the power to decrease energy dissipation in the anterior chamber with increased dependence on fluidics. The next is dry eyes. We all know it impaired tear film. The impaired tear film compromises visual recovery following surgery and also increases post-operative patient compliance. Cataract surgery is known to induce or increase the severity of pre-existent dry eye, and the management is based on history and slit lamp examination. On the slit lamp, we try to establish the tear meniscus height, whether it is normal or lower, whether the TBUT is short, whether there is significant meibomian gland issues, or there is staining of cornea and conjunctiva, either on the fluorescent stain or on the lissamine green stain. So we have the pictures here. And so in a patient with dry eye, whether symptomatic or symptomatic and with signs, we should go for optimization of ocular surface. prior to surgery with preservative-free lubricants, lead therapy if there is meibomian gland issues, and anti-inflammatory, particularly cyclosporin, taken at least a month. It takes at least a month to show effect, and so it should be started prior to surgery quite a long time beforehand, and should be continued for a prolonged period. And what is also important, if there is associated systemic disease, it should be properly controlled. I'll come to that later. And IOL power calculation and surgery is an issue, because if you don't have a good air-tear interface, the parameters, the images on either an optical or on the keratometry won't be ideal. And we should, of course, continue dry eye therapy after cataract surgery for patients' comfort. If the patient has had a episode of peripheral ulcerative keratitis, disease control for at least 3 to 6 months is important, because surgery is known to predispose to postoperative inflammation in a predisposed patient, and we should go for we should use systemic immunosuppressive in these patients before and after surgery, because there is a risk of postoperative corneal melt at the site of the incisions. And in intraoperative consideration, the wound should be placed by while avoiding the area of thinning, and scleral incision may trigger relapse. So we should ideally avoid scleral incision and go for clear corneal incision. And also suturing may also trigger relapse, we need to remember. Coming to corneal opacities, optical biometry is usually not possible in these cases, so we have to rely on ultrasonic biometry, and we may need to obtain the keratometry and the axial values from the other eye of the patient, the normal eye, and then take an informed decision after consulting with the patient and explaining to him the postoperative outcome, the postoperative outcome issues, and significantly compromise intraoperative view may be there in patients with corneal opacities. So endoillumination can be a good option if you have the benefit of having one. And our options is an only cataract surgery and avoiding PK if possible, because we know that corneal grafts are postoperative surgical issues, and they take a long time to heal, and they require patients to stay in follow-up for a pretty long, for years over. And otherwise, we do a triple procedure if the opacity is in the center and is dense and is known to affect vision. Now, there has been a description of corneal opacity gradation with A society, and it's available in the literature. I'm not going into the details. If there is a corneal tear, if there is a cataract in a corneal tear with relatively intact anterior capsule, we should do an only tear repair. If the anterior capsule is breached, the lens matter should be washed. The anterior vitrectomy should be done if the anterior hyaloid is breached, and secondary IOL implantation is ideal if the posterior capsule is either disintegrated or the anterior capsule, we cannot achieve a capsular excess. Now, if there is pterygium, Salzmann, or EBMD, these are treatable causes of irregular astigmatism, which affects the postoperative outcome and also interferes with keratometry. And ideally, if we should do an IOL power calculation after removal of these lesions. So pterygium should be removed if it's in the optical zone, if it's progressive or highly vascular, and if it causes high irregular astigmatism. If there is SND, we can do a superficial keratectomy before doing this keratometry. And in EBMD patients, if the myads are irregular on the keratometry, we can also go for debridement and PTK. Coming to corneal ectasia, what we must know that if it's a severe irregular astigmatism which cannot be helped with glasses, and the patient needs a... Is my time over?
Sir, 1 minute left. Please go ahead.
It'll be over. Need for specialized...
How much time have you put, sir, there? Hello?
Yes, sir.
We have 85 minutes, so let him speak on. We will leave the session by 85 minutes.
I have a couple of, I think.
Yeah, go on, Shayan, go on.
So if there is severe irregular astigmatism and there is a need for specialized CL for postoperative visual rehabilitation, we should go for a monofocal IOL, because if we are taking, if we are planning to use this kind of IOLs, then the toric IOL would be a hindrance. However, if the case is stable and if there is only moderate astigmatism and is correctable with glass preoperatively, toric IOL can be considered. And intraoperatively, positioning of the incision is important, particularly in case of PMCD. We should be avoiding the thin area because in PMCD, the thin area is in the periphery, and visibility may be quite compromised in this case, in these patients with irregular cornea. And we should avoid the use of OVD. And we should use OVD over cornea to improve clarity. If there is microphthalmos or nanophthalmos, we should rule out amblyopia, consider comorbidities with gonioscopy, ASOCT, UBM, B-scan. If there is a shallow AC, we should think about PI or laser iridoplasty. Optical biometry is preferred normally for short eye, and we need a piggyback IOL. UVL effusion is the chief concern in these cases. If there may be a subluxation of colobometris lens, we have to take care of that also. And paraoperatively, we should utilize mannitol orbital massage, vitrectomy, or scleral windows to take care of high positive posterior pressure. Post-keratorefractive surgery, IOL power calculation is a problem, and we should either employ formula or we should employ methods to bypass keratometry. Intraoperative considerations is important in RK because these incisions may open up, and we may prefer a sclerocorneal tunnel in these cases, and open RK scars may need resuturing. And in ablative surgery, we should take care that we do not disrupt the pre-existing flap, because that may induce epithelial ingrowth. If we go for cataract surgery after a PK or an EK, ideally we should already have done the cataract surgery along with the corneal procedure. Endothelial protection is of paramount importance. Prevention is better than cure, so avoiding the need for cataract removal with a grafted endothelium in place, and doing a triple procedure at the time of corneal transplantation, even if there is minimal cataract. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Shayan, for your lovely presentation on cataract with corneal comorbidities. Hopefully, for the juniors, this presentation will be quite helpful. I would request Dr. Pinakinag, if you are ready with your presentation, can you do next? Because mine and your will be slightly overlapping, so we will be teaching all the ways of how to deal with the intubations cataract. And because in intubations cataract, chances of capsule runout is more, so I'll be presenting after you have done your presentation. So Dr. Pinakinag is trained.
Dr. Sugoto, can you please request the management to increase the timing?
Yeah, I have already done. Don't worry, we have 85 minutes, so we'll have to leave in time. I'll request the
and if they can increase the volume, can you all hear properly?
Not to go beyond 11 minutes though. Okay, don't go beyond 11 minutes because then the last presenter or the penultimate presenter might miss out. So 11 minutes I have requested to set the timer on. Maybe half a minute extra is granted, but not beyond that. So
can I start, Sugoto?
Yes, I was thinking of introducing you with the slide, but because of the lack of time, I think you will start. Dr. Nag is trained both in India and UK. He had more than 12-13 years of UK experience and has now set up his own hospital in Hooghly, West Bengal, called Deeptakshi Eye Hospital. And he's a prolific surgeon. And let's see what Dr. Nag presents on Rexis complications in intumescent mature cataract.
Thank you, Sugoto. Thank you. And thank you again for inviting me, and also to Scientific Committee AIOC. Today, I'm going to talk about Rexis complications in intumescent mature cataract and how to prevent it. We have, over the years, doing our cataract surgery, especially in this intumescent mature cataract, we have come across lots of cataracts where we lost the Rexis and ended up having so many problems. So today, I'm just talking about this particular situation where intumescent white mature cataract can cause problem. So what are the complications? These are the runway Rexis and Argentinian flag sign, which we have in our experience come across quite a few times. And what are the causes of these complications in these situations? There is high intralenticular pressure. There's convex anterior lens capsule, shallow anterior chamber, trapped liquefied lens material behind the equator, pushing the nucleus upwards as soon as the anterior capsule is punctured. And also, diabetes and young patients are very prone to have it. And to avoid these Argentine flag signs, what we need to do? First, foremost, we need to check the speculum so that there is no undue pressure on the globe. Always stay in the capsule first. Fill AC antechamber with OVD. Take a fresh 23 or 24 gauge needle on a smooth 2 cc glass syringe. And why I do that, I'll come across and tell you later on. And engage the capsule with beveled edge pointing downwards. And there is also its important point. And the most important is you have to start suctioning just before puncturing the anterior capsule at a point before reaching the center, and you have to keep sucking and tap the nucleus or nudge the nucleus down a few times as long as soft lens matter is coming to the needle or the syringe, and then you refill the AC with OVD. There are optional extras which we all have tried. I have tried too. I've tried so many options, but nowadays with this new technique, I really don't have to use these. These are the pre-op IV mannitol, minimum volume of local anesthetics if subtenon perivalvular block is given. I usually do it on a topical now. High viscous OVDs, small rhexis followed by enlargement after cortical suction, and spiral rhexis. Both of them takes longer time. And in this particular scenario, I prefer to use this Haldipurkar microcapsular rhexis forceps, which suits very well with my hand, although I don't have any particular financial interest on this. And now I'm going to show you a few of the videos. Here is a mature cataract, and I'm just entering and see the bevel edge down, and here I punctured and I kept sucking as long as the lens matter keeps coming. And now once I'm happy, satisfied that no more fluid is coming, I just go with this micro rhexis forceps and then do the rhexis. Although in all normal situations, I do the rhexis with the cystitome, but here I prefer to do it the micro rhexis forceps because it gives more controlled hold. So here I don't have to worry. It's not running. There is no tendency of it running towards the periphery. I can wait. I can come back. I can put more OVDs and then go back, and slowly I can get the rhexis as big as I need. Or I do it on the topical. That's why the patient keeps moving. And here I put some more OVDs, and then I go and do the rhexis as the size as much bigger as I want. Now it's done. Here is another one. Here also I have stained the capsule, and now I'm going to show you. This is the 23 gauge needle with a glass syringe, which is very smooth. It's not getting stuck. And actually the same syringe which I use for using the Trypan Blue, I use the same syringe to do the suction. So I started suctioning before puncturing, and now I keep sucking. Although in this particular situation, there was not much cortical matter there, but still I didn't take any chance. So I still punctured and sucked as much as I could. Now with the same rhexis forceps, I went in and did the rhexis. Now, before I tried all sort of techniques like optional lectures and as well as phaco punch, but never worked consistently. So I had to sort out and have to keep changing until I found this particular technique. For last 5 years, while I'm using this technique, I just lost only one case where the rhexis ran out, and that too was because I was not vigilant enough. I didn't take out most of the loose matter before I actually started doing the phaco. I started doing the rhexis. Here you can see this is a very intumescent cataract. I did the side port. So nowadays I make sure that even I nudge sometimes the peripheral peripheral cortical region so that most of the loose matter comes out and doesn't keep any locally intact. And I have not come across any Argentine flag sign in last 5 years. Today, in fact, today I did 3 of the cases this morning and all came out very nicely. And especially in this pandemic situation, more and more people are coming with this hard white mature cataract. Usually we used to get 2 in a list, but now I'm getting 4 or 5 even in a list, because those are the people who are actually desperate to have the surgery, and we are getting more and more of these people recently with very intumescent white mature cataract. So I have stained the capsule now and put some, and I use normal hypermellose, that's normal methyl cellulose. I don't use Hilon or any other high viscous material now. Just a simple step. Now I'm going to puncture it and then keep sucking. You can see the cortical matter just slowly is coming towards the needle, and I am nudging the nucleus down. You are very safe as long as right in the middle, the tip, you can see the tip, then it's very safe. You can nudge down the nucleus as many times as you want to release all the entrapped cortical matter behind the equator, so that there is no push of the nucleus or there is no chances of rhexis running out. See, I can easily wait and put some more viscoelastic and then go and do the rhexis. This is very simple tape. It doesn't take longer time like double rhexis, like spiral rhexis. You can do it straight away. You don't have to use high viscous OVDs, no extra cost involved, and it's very simple. You can just do it nice and round rhexis. Here is the last case. Here I'm just going to puncture just before. See, the fluid came out, and then now I'm nudging the nucleus, and more and more that the nucleus is the cortical matter is coming, more and more coming. Sorry, the patient is on topical, it keeps moving, and also because of the constant of time, I had to increase the speed a little bit. That's why the movement is so much. Now I'm going to put some more OVDs, and now I'm milking out with the experience of that locally remaining in the periphery. Nowadays, if there is any chance of that, I can see I just sort of gently milk it out, any of those fluid or entrapped cortical matter from the periphery, and then I go ahead with the rhexis forceps to do the rhexis. So less stressful and less stress to the zonule as well as the capsule. It is actually tearing very nicely, and as I'm going through, there is no tendency of going it to the periphery. So here is a nice and complete rhexis. And if I can do it, I'm sure you can do it too. You can even do it much better, and it's very simple, much economical, takes less time, and you won't have much problem anymore like I haven't got in last 5 years. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I'll hand over it to Sugato.
Please unshare your screen, Dr. Nag. Thank you for the lovely presentation. So I will be doing the next presentation, and it is on phacoemulsification in compromised rhexis. Is my screen visible there?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It's visible. Thank you. Just give me a few seconds. So I have learned the way Dr. Pinaki Nag is doing, and I have learned the way Dr. Pradeep Mahanto, who is another prolific teacher, who is doing the rhexis in intumescent cataract in a different way, and I normally combine them. So today my talk is phacoemulsification on compromised rhexis. Now, complete rhexis is a prerequisite for good phacoemulsification. In fact, now with premium IOL use increasing, perfectly sized rhexis and perfectly positioned rhexis is very important. Now the incidence of rhexis runout is reported from 0.8% to 5.5%, and Moorfield Eye Hospital study, which was published, I think, in 2015, reported about 1.55% of rhexis runout. Now, in experienced surgeon hand, is mostly in intumescence cataract where the rhexis run out, but also when the surgeon is rushing or lack of concentration can also lead to run out of rhexis, and pseudo exfoliation and pediatric cataract are also causes of rhexis run out. Now, we know prevention is better than cure. I know that Dr. Nag has already illustrated very well how to do a rhexis, but I will also show my way of doing the rhexis, where the staining of capsule, as he has mentioned, is very important, then flattening of the capsule with cohesive OVD, and then decompressing the central internuclear pressure by needle aspiration as shown by Dr. Nag, and then I do a small central CCC because there are loculi of fluid in periphery, so I don't try to do a big CCC in the beginning. So after aspiration, I do a central small CCC, then I break the internuclear fluid pocket which is tapped in the periphery by gentle wash and also by tapping over the capsule, and then I extend the CCC, make a larger CCC by giving a tangential cut with a venous scissor and then extending the rhexis. So it's involved two processes. One is the central puncturing and decompressing the central portion, then decompressing the peripheral pockets, and then enlarging the rhexis. So in this way, I prevent rhexis run out in most of my cases. In fact, in all my cases, if I'm vigilant. Now, you have to vigilant and stop when the rhexis is running out. If you look at this video, you can see the rhexis has run out there. So you have to stop immediately. I was a bit casual possibly, but I realized it has run out. So increase the magnification and putting more OVD. Ideally, the OVD should be put where the rhexis is running out. This is an old video. Then you have to evert the flap back onto the lens so that you can see where the rhexis has run out. So you evert that flap and then a quick gentle pull towards the center and you might be able to retrieve the rhexis. So you have to be vigilant. Now here I'm doing a rhexis. I have done the central perforation, but I thought of taking the instrument out and my rhexis got stuck, the capsule got stuck and is being pulled out. But quickly I thought that the pupil iris margin might have restricted the complete run out. So I tried to put the rhexis back in the flap which went out, and again tried the maneuver of pulling it down to the center, and in this case also I managed to pull it back. But you are not so lucky in each and every cases. So if the rhexis has run out and you have not managed to pull it back, then whether to continue with phaco or to convert depends on the surgeon expertise, depend on the grade of the nucleus, depends on the comorbidity such as any corneal problem, and also we have to think about what plane of emulsification we'll be using, whether it will be in the bag, which might be difficult in these situations. Probably the better option is iris plane or anterior chamber. If you're doing the phaco in the anterior chamber, then don't forget to use good cohesive OVDs. And also you have to think about whether to place the IOL in the bag or in the sulcus, depending upon the tear or the end result after the phaco. Now here, the principles are quite same. You have to do minimal hydrodissection and minimal nucleus rotation. Here I have done the staining of the capsule, but after putting the OVD, you can see the staining was not good. So my mistake was not to restain that. Now I have done the central decompression as I have discussed in the needle with the needle, getting good fluid out. But my second mistake was not to do the second small CCC as I normally do. I tried to do the largest CCC in the same go, and because of the poor visibility and poor staining, the rhexis has run out here. It has gone to the periphery. So the option is, if you want to continue with the thing, what you need to do. You need to get rid of this capsule, get good access to the nucleus. So there are two ways. One is cutting the thing off with venous or nicking with the needle. In this case, I decided to cut the hanging extra bit with the help of the venous scissor, and I'm doing the phaco. So you have to be very gentle, not too much of rotation, don't rush, and try to do the movement away. Here the tear extension is, I am moving my nucleus on this side when I'm cracking. And once I have got a good crack, I am removing the nucleus very slowly in the anterior iris plane, not in the back, so that I'm not putting that much of pressure on the iris. And the other thing you have to keep an eye on is on the flap, whether the flap movement is on, whether the flap is everted. As Dr. Rohit Omprakash has said, if the flap is everted and is fluttering, most likely you are not getting a wraparound tear, which is not extending to the posterior capsule. On the other hand, if the flap is inverted, if it's taut and not fluttering, then the chances of the rhexis getting wraparound and extending to the posterior capsule is there. So gentle phacoemulsification, use of good cohesive and slow phaco in the anterior plane, and keeping a vigilant eye onto the rhexis is very important. And you always have to have plan B. So if anything goes wrong, you have to convert it to a SICS or extracapsular according to your expertise. And you also have to keep an eye whether the vitreous is prolapsing from the extension. So in this case, I managed to cut the extended rhexis with the venous scissor, managed to do the phaco, managed to implant the IOL in the bag. You can see the rhexis run out in this area, but I have placed the haptic away from the run out, so it will stay quite nicely for long times to come. In my next case here, the rhexis has run out in a difficult position, is almost below my incision. So it is very difficult to cut the flap. I initially tried to retrieve it with, but because of the difficult position, it wasn't possible. And it is very difficult to cut the flap away with the venous scissor in this situation. Here you can see I'm trying to retrieve the rhexis, but unfortunately, actually, I am making it worse because the pull direction is not well. So I thought about giving a nick to the other side and decided to bring tear the capsule from the other side and save the rhexis as much as possible, though it has gone out at about 12 o'clock position. Here it has gone out. And to get good access, I give another nick to extend the good portion of the rhexis to a little bit more, so that there is no strain on the capsule or the capsular bag when I'm doing the phaco. Once this is done, because it's a soft cataract, I decided to do a gentle hydrodissection and gentle hydrodelineation because these are quite sticky, but don't put too much of fluid. And now again, minimal rotation or slow rotation. You can see I am using both the dialer and my phaco tip to do dual rotation so that zonule are not getting pressed. And then once the chop is done, I take away each quadrant very gently. Don't rush in these situations, and use low phaco parameters and try to maintain the chamber as much as possible. So here you can see the cataract is quite soft. So I am managing to get the nucleus out without disturbing the extended area of the rhexis. And once the nucleus is out, you have to do a IA. Again, at this position, you can see I'll be keeping my phaco tip there to maintain the stability. I'm injecting the OVD with my phaco tip here. Don't pull out the phaco tip and disbalance the anterior chamber. For the IA, you have to again be careful not pulling the flap. And again, keep an eye on the flap, whether it is everted or inverted, whether it's fluttering or not. And same principle applies, put the lens with the haptic away from the torn area. Now, I'll skip this. Probably my time is running out, so I'll keep this slide and I'll go on to the last slide here. This is an old video where I got an Argentine flag. I didn't used to practice the method which I do now. Again, in this situation, if you are happy to continue with your phaco, you have to have good access to the nucleus. So I gave a nick with the venous scissor and did a hemirexis in the lower half, and then I am giving a nick with the needle, 26G bend needle, giving a nick onto the superior half of the rexis and trying to get a hemirexis on the superior half so that I can get access to the nucleus. But always remember to have plan B. Don't let your ego win. If you feel the rexis is getting wraparound tear, then stop and convert it to SICS or phaco. Here I decided to do little bit of anterior chamber phaco with the use of good cohesive OVD and managed to do complete my phaco and then managed to implant the lens. So that's what I wanted to present. I think my time is up. Otherwise, I can go back and present. Is my time up? I
It's
cannot
just
set a
timer.
timer.
Yes, sir. Time up.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Okay,
up.
okay. I'm stopping. Sorry. So thank you for your patience hearing. Next, it will be Dr. Pradeep Mohanto who will be presenting on managing small pupil. Dr. Pradeep Mohanto did his MS from PGI Chandigarh and his fellowship on Vitreoretina from Chennai, SN Shankar Nethralaya. He's the founder of Netrajyoti Eye Hospital. Pradeep, you start sharing your screen while I'm introducing you. He's the founder of Netrajyoti Eye Hospital, and he's probably world famous now because of his teaching. He has thousands and thousands of followers in YouTube, and he runs the group called Eye Surgery Worldwide, both in WhatsApp and Telegram. And I am one of his followers as well, and watch his video every day. So thank you, Pradeep, and please start your presentation.
Hello, am I audible, Shogata?
Yes, you are audible.
Shall I use the audio in the video itself? Hello?
Please start. Is visible. Please start.
Hello. Hello, sir.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please share your screen. Please
Your screen
share
has
with
been
audio.
unshared. Your screen has been unshared. Please
Sir,
reshare.
please share with audio, sir.
Share with audio?
Or you can speak. You can speak, Pradeep. You can speak.
Sir, audio inbuilt, sir. Video में. Audio inbuilt in video.
Okay,
Sir,
okay.
sir, please stop your sharing. Please share with audio, sir.
Because of the lack of time, it might take time. So probably
Yeah.
it will be
Okay.
better if Dr. Mohan to speak along with the video.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. You can speak.
Yeah. So this is small people without using any pupil expansion device. Am I audible?
You
Hello?
are audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. So this is without using any device like iris hook or any ring. In such cases, we have to do a rexis which is larger than the size of the people. So we have to go beyond the margin of the people. And then I'm using this kind of pre-chopper nowadays. I have no financial interest in this, but this is a very good device. We can pre-chop the nucleus in soft cataracts very easily in such cases. And see how nicely we can pre-chop. And now 2 heminuclei are there. This is 2 pieces of on heminucleus. And now we can easily manage the nucleus. See, as I start emulsifying the pieces, see, people becomes more small the iris is floppy, but still, since the nucleus is pre-chopped, we can manage the nucleus very nicely in the central 3 millimeter safe zone. The two pieces have come. The other heminucleus is still there. You can see that the iris is floppy. And this is the last piece of the nucleus. And the nucleus is managed. The cortical cleanup is done. The intraocular lens is implanted. And now we can use one more instrument to, in such cases, to see if we have left out any cortex, or this is the instrument. This is a Y-shaped retractor. We can call it a Y retractor. And we can see all around 360 degree whether whether there is any cortex anywhere, or if there is any nuclear piece hidden under the iris anywhere. We can see that. And now let us see how to use iris hooks. I usually use 4 iris hooks in some cases, and sometimes 5. When the pupil is very small, when the iris is very much floppy, as we have observed in the other eye, and if there is any fibrotic band in the pupil, and if there is occlusio pupilli, in such cases, iris hook is very important. In such cases, we may not be able to use a ring, particularly in cases where there is iris is floppy, plus there is some amount of LIDRS. This is how we can use the iris hooks. Just retract the silicone guard, hook the pupillary margin, and then advance this pupillary guard, silicone guard. Durexis and hydro. And now another tip is how to go in. Always we must go bevel down and gently glide over the margin of the pupil. At this time, we should not see that we are not pushing the pupil, and just in some cases, the pupil iris, the antechamber may be shallow. So in such cases, direct chop is much better than the divide and conquer technique. And now this is a direct chop. Bury the tip in the substance of the nucleus and chop. And now, as I chop, I emulsify that small piece, and thus we can prevent that piece going here and there and hitting the corneal endothelium. In this way, we can manage the whole nucleus. And now, as we implant the lens after cortical cleanup, we should remove one iris hook on either side of the main wound. The iris will fall back and the intraocular lens will not push the iris. The intraocular lens can be easily implanted, and then we can remove all other hooks. And now let us see how we can use this device. This is a B-hex ring invented by Dr. Suben Bhattacharjee. And this is the B-hex forceps, 23G forceps, which should be used to use this B-hex ring. This is a slow motion video how to hold the B-hex ring. There's a flange and there is a middle tab. You just hold the middle tab with the B-hex forceps. Don't go beyond the flange. And now one more tip is the device should be totally in the anterior chamber. Here, the trailing flange is stuck in the main wound. So when it happens, we cannot engage the leading flange at on go. we have to push the trailing flange in the anterior chamber and then inject some more visco. We should use some visco behind the iris to make some room, and then go to the 5 o'clock flange, hold the middle tab and tuck this under the iris. And now hold the tab at 1 o'clock and tuck this. If the antechamber becomes shallow, we should refill the antechamber with visco. The other flange, which is at 10 o'clock, I use the left side port and left hand. Go to the middle tab, hold it, pull it centrally and tuck the device. And now the advantage is it is quick. It is quicker than iris hooks. We don't make, in iris hooks, we have to make some stab incisions. We don't have to do that. In fact, in this case, there was only one side port. So only one main incision and one side port we can manage if we use this ring. Capsulorhexis is done, hydrodissection is done, and nucleus management is not difficult because the iris is not pulled up. As a routine case, we can complete nucleus management, cortical cleanup is done, and now on TIFF, when we implant the intraocular lens, the leading as well as the trailing haptics should go into the bag at one shot. Otherwise, the trailing haptic may press on the BHEX and there can be problem. And now how to remove it? Just pull it centrally and then come little up and then go peripherally, and all the flanges will disengage, and then we can easily pull it out. So that's it. We can manage all cases in this way. We can either no device or iris hooks or BHEX ring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohanto, for the excellent presentation. Dr. Arup Chakraborty, if you can start sharing your screen. Dr. Arup Chakraborty, who is a graduate of Medical College, Kolkata, and did his post-graduation from RIO. Is Dr. Arup Chakraborty here, or is he in next room as well? He has a presentation there.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah. So he did his MS from RIO, Kolkata, and he was a lecturer in Vivekananda Institute of Medical Sciences, Kolkata, postgraduate institute. Later, he founded his own institute, Amulya Jyoti Eye Foundation, where 22 doctors are working at present. He was also in the executive committee of Ophthalmological Society of West Bengal, and also in the scientific committee and academic research committee of AI West from 2005 to 2008. He's a prolific surgeon and high volume surgeon. So over to Dr. Arup Chakraborty.
Thank you, Roberto, for your kind introduction, and thanks AIOS for giving me the opportunity. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible and your slide is visible.
Now the challenges of a hard cataract. First is the mode of energy. Apart from that, there is the absence of the protective epinuclear layer. There's a paucity of the cortex. There's an absence of red reflex, potential laxity of the zonules. You might have there's an increased risk of endothelial damage and, of course, wound burn. These are the necessary things which one has to have in the OT. One is a dispersive viscoelastic, which you should use depending upon the hardness, and it is better to use it so that you are safe. At least you can have a crystal clear cornea. Other things which are necessary is the CTR, the iris hooks, the capsular hooks, Cioni ring, and of course, a vitreoretinal backup. Now, of a standard phacoemulsification has to be followed. That means we should have a proper incision, proper depth of the tunnel, proper length of the tunnel. You should so that you can do the rhexis well, and you have a larger rhexis, because these are the cases where you will need a lot of the size of the nucleus being bigger. You need to rotate the nucleus, and you need to have actually chopping the nucleus and dividing the nucleus. Now, a standard 5 to 5.5 millimeter of the size of the rhexis should be attempted, should have, try to avoid any runaway of the surgery. Then your half of the job is done. Now, another part which is very important is your hydrodissection. The hydro part should be very gentle, give very small bouts of water inside, and see that the back pressure, it's very important, and you should always press on the center of the nucleus so that the fluid comes out from the side, and see that the nucleus rotates very well. Now the rotation is complete. This is a case I'm going to show. This is on the harder side. I do a stop and chop technique, try to make a longer sculpting, and then try to hold, and I use a vertical chop, and all my cases are under topical anesthesia with 2.2 millimeter incision. Try to chop it up to the posterior plate, separate it, and make as many pieces, smaller pieces. If you can make 4 pieces, you can make 6 pieces. I normally go for 6 pieces so that the the emulsification becomes much easier, and there is less stress on the zonules. Go slowly, try to hold. If you can't hold on the first attempt, try again or rotate it and try to find out some other part where you can hold it. Remove all the display or separated nucleus from the center. Again, rotate it, hold it, see if it is can hold it properly. If it is done, then go on, rotate further to hold the part where it is, which has come out from the rhexis margin. And if necessary, you use a separate instrument. Like there was a small piece here left, I introduced a spatula and removed the remaining nucleus so that I don't injure the posterior capsule. This is a rock hard cataract, as you can see. So all the processes like an incision, you have to go a little slightly bigger tunnel, stay in the nucleus, stay in the capsule. In these cases, I normally use a dispersive viscoelastic before doing the rhexis so that it stains the endothelium. or you now do a hydro very gently. Tap on the center of the nucleus and then see whether it should rotate smoothly. Now, sometimes it becomes very difficult in these cases to hold the nucleus and go and chop it. And mostly I do the vertical chop with the chopper length being 1 to 1.5 millimeter, depending on the sharp chopper, depending on the hardness of the nucleus. And I try to separate. If I can't do it at one point, hold the nucleus, go slowly, do again, as much as you can separate up to the posterior plate. Now here again, I'm trying to hold, try to make 6 places, chop in, trying to separate. It's a leathery type of cataract. So everything has to be very slow. Hold it gently, keeping your pressure vacuum very high. Normally I keep around 450 to 500. Rotate again and see whether you can hold any part which is slightly loose. Though you have separated it, but there are areas where still being leathery, it's still not fully separated. Again, you try to hold and chop it. It is coming out slowly. These are the areas where you should be very careful, because a slight amount of your overconfidence will make you situation difficult for you. I'm sorry that I did not.
You are not audible, Dr. Chakravarti.
Surgery tried to use viscoelastic as and when necessary, especially viscoat, to coat the endothelium and also to have
Not audible. Arubda, not audible.
Sir, Dr. Anup, weather very low, sir. Internet very low, sir.
Not the endoscopic. And endoscopic, I do not have the endoscopic. What I do is
audible now.
Yes, sir.
Now, then, in summary, to tackle a yes, completely is not always possible. Thank you. Thank you, Sugato.
Thank you very much. Your connection was probably causing a little bit of problem. You were not audible for few seconds in the end, but otherwise a lovely presentation showing how to do tackle a hard cataract, rather rock hard cataract. Angshuman, if you can share your screen. Yeah, so our next presenter will be Dr. Angshuman Goswami. He will be tackling the posterior polar cataract. Angshuman did his post-graduation from Maulana Azad College and did his fellowship from Germany in ICO fellowship. He has worked in a lot of places in India, and he wants to learn new methods and pass them on to his fellow colleagues and pupils. So Angshuman, yeah. Thank you, Anshuman.
Dr. Sugato, can you hear me? All of you can
Yes,
hear me?
please. Yes.
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sugato and AIOS for giving me this opportunity to speak on this occasion. As we are seeing great surgeons doing surgery one after another, I'll be showing one of the most difficult cases that one can handle, that is a posterior polar cataract. These cataracts are a challenge in itself, and there are a lot of parameters in phaco surgery which we have to actually alter when we are carrying out surgery on these cases. So these are usually congenital cataracts. We all know that they're many times bilateral. So one has to be a bit aware of that, that the other eye may also be having a similar situation, and accordingly the patient also has to be counseled and all the risk factors are to be taken care of. So they are difficult not only from the surgeon's point of view, but from the patient's point of view. They cause early glare, difficulty in vision. So patients tend to come a little earlier than normal to the surgeon for their treatment. Now, why are they more difficult from the surgeon's point of view? Because it's been seen that there's many times a strong adhesion of the opacity with a weak posterior capsule. In fact, it's been seen that about 26% of the cases may have defective posterior capsule, and there's a high rate of intraoperative PC rents, almost 40 to 50% in cases of posterior polar cataract. Taking these into consideration, one has to be very careful, and not just during the surgery but pre-operatively while counseling the patient. Number one, of course, we have to do the usual cataract workup that we do for all patients, and if we have the facility for a UBM or anterior segment OCT or pentacam, we should use it to the full, because that way we will have a visualization of the defect in the posterior capsule, and we would be more prepared in handling the case during the surgery. But everybody may not have these facilities in his setup, and these being very expensive equipment, and surgeons all around might not have it. So one simple rule of thumb that one should follow is, if one is suspecting it to be a posterior polar cataract, then treat it like a posterior polar cataract. Respect it and don't think it to be a posterior subcapsular and be casual with it. So when in doubt, always consider a posterior polar cataract. So as you can see the pentacam and the ASOT pictures, and here you can see in the ASOCT picture that there's a nucleus matter, in fact the cataract matter coming out through a posterior dehiscence out here. This is often being called a teardrop sign. So moreover, because of all these factors, it's very important that one should explain to the patient pre-operatively that there is a very high chance of having a nuclear drop during the surgery. The surgery is going to be much longer than one would expect in a normal case. So they should be at least mentally prepared. It may not, but then one should be very clear with the patient, because his expectations are skyrocketing nowadays. Second is secondary posterior segment intervention should always be explained to him in case there is a complication, and they may have a delayed visual recovery. And one important point that one must keep in mind is that patients who have a unilateral posterior polar cataract might have amblyopia, so that aspect also needs to be explained to the patient. A very important point from a medical legal point is that make a diagram of how the posterior polar cataract looks and explain it to the patient, and also explain it to him that why the risks of surgery are much higher in these cases than a normal cataract. You may even diagrammatically explain it to him that how the nucleus can get dislocated back in the vitreous. Now, coming to the surgical aspects, the most important thing that has to be done in the beginning is adjust the parameters of your phaco machine. The phaco machine that we carry out, I have no financial interest in this, but whatever type of phaco machine we carry out, the basic principle remains the same. Do slow motion phaco. Please do not try to be very exploring in case of posterior polar cataract. Even the best surgeons have difficulty doing them. So people who have just started learning phaco probably should avoid doing it themselves. And the parameters to be set for posterior polar cataract is that you should first and foremost lower the intraocular pressure, because these cases we don't want too much of pressure to fall on the posterior capsule and break through. Second is we always reduce the aspiration flow rate, because we want slow motion phaco. We don't want too much of chamber depth variation, by which what can happen, the posterior capsule can move forward and get ruptured. And phaco power usually is kept a little lower side itself, because in any case these cataracts come early and many a times their nucleus is very soft. So of course we can keep the parameters at its normal values and adjust it accordingly. Now I'll show you how ideally a posterior polar cataract should be carried out, the various steps that are important, and we'll start with the video. A capsular excess of 5 to 5.5 millimeters. Can you hear me, Sugato? Has to allow adequate maneuvering space and the option of
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
in case of complication like PC rent. Once the section is made, the anterior chamber
Yes, we
is
can hear you.
compressed and hydro
Yes, sir, audible.
at the deepest level possible is done gently. Never do a hydrodissection in PPC, as the fluid wave will rupture the PC and there will be a nucleus drop immediately. For the same reason, once demarcated, no attempt is made to rotate the nucleus. The superficial epinuclear plate is shaved off till one loosens the nucleus enough to flip it over into the mid-pupillary plane, where it is completely emulsified. One should never try to remove the posterior plaque till the end of cortex management at any cost. The epinucleus is now peeled off from the periphery to the center, again taking care to emulsify it before it can pull the posterior plate along with it. Always refill the chamber with OVD from the side port before removing the phaco probe from the AC. This prevents sudden AC shallowing and bulging forward of the PC, which may cause a PC rupture. For irrigation aspiration, bimanual IA probes are always preferred, as the chamber stability is better. Again, it cannot be overemphasized that the cortex is peeled off from the periphery to the center to form a bunch, and it is removed with the plaque at the end. The IOL is then implanted in the usual manner, taking care that the leading haptic does not point towards the posterior capsule while injecting into the back. I'll show you another technique which has been propagated by Vasavada, doing a hydrodissection inside out, and I've tried to modify it by doing a transverse trenching using a Ozil system that we have, which can be helpful in avoiding rotation of the nucleus. I will show you how hydrodelineation of the nucleus is done from inside the nucleus. First described by Dr. Abhay Vasavada, it is easier to perform, provides superior control, reduces stress to the zonules, and more precise in terms of demarcating the central core of the nucleus. A deep trench is cut in the center of the nucleus using slow motion phaco so as not to rock the nucleus while trenching it. Once trenched to adequate depth, the phaco probe is taken out while simultaneously injecting OVD from the side port to prevent shallowing of the anterior chamber. A hydrodissection cannula is then introduced to the main incision, and the tip is placed adjacent to the right wall of the great depth, depending upon the density of the cataract. It then penetrates the central lens substance and fluid is injected through the right wall of the trench. To fracture the nucleus further, without rotating it, two trenches are cut on either side of the main trench using torsional phaco. By using transverse phaco, two clean cuts can be made on either side of the trench without rocking the nucleus to and fro. The nucleus is thus cracked into smaller parts without the need for rotation, and thus safeguarding the weak posterior capsule from torsional forces. And this is how it moves on, and of course it continues as it is, and we complete the surgery. I'll just share a few useful tips while doing a posterior polar cataract. You can use a blunt dissector like an iris repositor to separate out the anterior capsular cortex from the anterior capsule subcortical area. This way you avoid hydrodissection. You can use a Kuglen's hook on viscoelastic to take out the subincisional epinucleus. Use both hands whenever feasible. Be slow. And most importantly, leave the plaque to be removed for the end. Don't touch the plaque till the end of surgery because that is what is plugging the hole in the posterior capsule. So, to concise and complete, the do's and don'ts: always adjust the parameters of the phaco machine.
Anshuman, I think you have to finish because
Never put too much of fluid inside the AC, and always install the AC before going on to the next. Just a moment.
Anshuman, if you can stop sharing because lack of time, otherwise Dr. Prasad will not be able to present.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the
Thank you very much.
I'll
We'll go on
request
to the next
Dr.
presenter.
Samrat Prasad to share his screen, please. Dr. Prasad, who is trained again both in UK and India, is a prolific, not only a prolific cataract surgeon, but also a prolific vitreoretinal surgeon, has lot of publication and lot of hours from Royal College of London and also American Cataract Surgery Society. It's a long introduction. I'll cut it short because shortage of time. Dr. Prasad, if you can start presenting.
Thank you, Sugato. Thank you, AIOS, and thank you for the chance being here.
Please speak it loudly, Dr. Prasad.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, but it's low. Voice is low. Can you be louder?
I'll bring it in closer. My topic today was managing subluxated lenses.
Much
I'm going
better.
to show you a couple of cases with extremely lenses. The main reasons for subluxations that you know either people who are born with this, like this young girl who has Marfan syndrome, and I'll show you both her eyes, or trauma. And there are other causes, but those are the main two ones. If you think of that and you think, oh my God, how am I going to manage that lens? Well, you could take it out, you could sacrifice the bag. But I don't want to sacrifice the bag because what has happened is the zonules are lost. The lens has become spherical rather than a biconvex disc. So I've made a capsular axis supported by two iris hooks. And then I'm putting a capsule retention ring, which you can see, and I'm guiding it in manually because these are very delicate maneuvers. You don't want that CTR popping up in front of the anterior capsule because then you're in big trouble. You see, I'm using two forceps just to make sure it goes exactly where I want it, which is just behind the rim of the CCC, so that it stretches the bag. And once the bag is stretched, it covers the pupil. And then we just aspirated the lens matter out because these are young patients. They come to you not because they have a cataract, they come to you because they're no longer manageable by spectacles or cylinders. So I put in a thing called an Emmett segment, sutured it into a Hoffman pocket, and I put a 3-piece lens into it. So I did very well, and I thought, okay, I can do a second eye. So this is the second eye. You see, this one looks even worse. And I think, oh, well, I did manage that one. I can probably manage this one. I've made a Hoffman pocket superiorly ready for my thing if I can manage everything. I put in liberal doses of Viscoat to dampen the vitreous back. I do not want to disturb the vitreous face. Mistake number one, what I'm doing now, I'm making a capsular axis, the edge of which is very close to the equator of the lens. It is not far enough, there is not enough flange of anterior capsule left to hold the CCC in place, as you will see. So when I start putting the CCC in place right now, it just meets a lot of resistance. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to slide in easily. This is a soft lens in a young person. 9-year-old, if I remember right. So it's not supposed to do that, but I'm trying to put it in and it won't go. It gets sort of gets stuck there, just will not go. So I say, okay, I just want to stuff it where I want it. So I put my 2 forceps in. I'm just trying to put it into the equator, but yes, it can go in there. And the moment you come out, it comes out again. It doesn't stay. So you win some, you lose some. You the first one, the other eye I won. This one I won, but in a different way. So I'm just trying. I keep persisting, thinking, oh no, once the whole thing is in, it will stay because a lot of it will be caught behind the anterior capsule, and a bit which won't be will manage. So I keep doing that. But if you watch the top there, it's not really moving. You know, I'm doing my best, holding the capsule with one hand, not to rupture it, and trying to put the CCC in with the other one. But at some point, I decide to give up. So it doesn't quite work. So I'm just doing my best, all sorts of bimanual antics. Let's get this thing in place, because I still believe at this stage, if I get the ring in and expand the bag, then I'll have won the game. But you can see that the whole thing will just come out again. It just won't stay. That bag is not, and because if I made a smaller CCC, I might have gotten away with it. So now I want to check whether there is vitreous in the anterior segment. So I've put in some triamcinolone, which is diluted, and actually, to my surprise, the vitreous face has not been broken in spite of all my fiddling. There's no vitreous. You see those particles floating freely. Whatever particles are stuck are behind the capsule. So I have a bag which is not quite a bag I want, but I have a bag. So I put a 3-piece lens into the bag, knowing full well that that bag is not going to keep this central because I've not managed to put my capsule tension ring in and fixate it. So I then ended up deciding to suture the haptic, very similar to what I would have sutured the emerald segment with. Using the same technique for the Hoffman's pocket, where you pass the needle in twice behind the iris, in front of the anterior capsule, and then tie your knot inside that pocket. So you end up, the zonules at the bottom were okay, if you remember when we started. So I just make sure it's sitting well there and leave it there. I tidy up the anterior capsule because, again, this is a young person. She's going to have capsular phimosis. I know that. I just make big anterior capsule, sacrifice the bits which I don't need. And that case is also done. So yes, one eye we managed the way we wanted to. The other eye I had to make it up as I went along. Plan A didn't work, but there was a plan B, and the plan B worked. So there are lots of things you have to sometimes think on your feet and manage these things. I'm still trying to tidy up the anterior capsule as much as I can. And the pupil comes down and the lens is central and everything's looking okay. About 9 years follow-up on her. This is an old video. And she's doing well with both eyes even today. So there we are. That's what to do. Couple of things to keep in mind. You could have said, why didn't you just do a lensectomy and put in a scleral fixated lens or an iris claw lens? Well, undisturbed vitreous is a huge advantage. If you look up the Marfan's literature, the rate of retinal detachment is up to 10 to 13% over time. If I don't disturb the vitreous, as I did not in both those eyes, I've left this little girl with a better chance of living for quite some time without a retinal detachment than if I tried to do a Pastrana lensectomy with her. Because you see these little things sometimes, see that little hole there? You wouldn't have found it. You would easily have missed it if I wasn't doing an internal search. This is another patient. Or you see that little flap there? Again, if I hadn't done an internal search after my fiddly phacosurgery where I sacrificed the capsule, you could miss things like this, which is not what you want to miss, because that is terrible. Patient comes back 2 weeks later with an RD, beautifully sitting lens. Doesn't quite work. So those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you. I think I'll finish here. Any questions? I think we might have a minute or two. I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prashant. Thank you very much. If I can't see any question in the chat box, so I would like to thank, just give me a second. We have still a couple of minutes left.
I want to ask something, Sugato.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Somdat, how did you suture the haptic of the intraocular lens? Is there any chance of slipping it out?
No, actually, Pradip, the once you have sutured this thing in, it is sticking to the right place. It won't slip. You don't
Okay.
need little hole. You know, the normal SFIOL with the little eyelet. Those
It doesn't have.
lenses, these are not PMMA lenses. These are flexible haptics. So once you made your knot tight, it will just, it's sort of after time you can do UBM studies and you will see that that bit of haptic is actually part of the ciliary bodies, is grown in
Okay,
the ciliary body.
nice, very nice. It's a good new thing I've seen. Thank you.
Most welcome.
So if there is no other question, I will just like to, Somdatta, have you stopped sharing your screen?
I think I have.
Yeah, okay. I'll just, we have 1 minute left. I would like to thank all the participants. I couldn't present their thing before. So thank you, Shayan, for the lovely presentation on cornea. And then it's myself, Pradeep Das, speaking on small pupil, Dr. Nag showing us how to deal with intumescent cataract rhexis, Dr. Chakraborty showing how to deal with hard cataract, and Dr. Goswami, the most difficult PPC, and then Dr. Prasad showing the jugglery with the subluxated, severely subluxated lenses. Thank you so much for taking your time out for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sugato. It was
Thank you,
nice
everyone.
having us in your session.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sugato.
Sugato.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll leave the, I think it's 6:25, 16:25. Thank you so much.